Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host of the Leaders Out podcast. Today, I have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guest, my new friend, Mr. Gary Wohlman, originally from New York. He's been around the world, but now is in a beautiful. He found as part of the, as we say in French, as a spot in the sun and beautiful in the countryside in Australia, literally in the boonies. But hey, he's happy. He's having. He's always, going in nature and the waterfalls and is living his best life. At the end of the day, that's what matters. We had a phenomenal talk on Monday. Today is Friday, May 12th, 5 days ago. And it was one of the most amazing calls because he really opened up his heart for us, for me on this podcast. He shared out his background. If you didn't watch it, please do so, because that's one of the most beautiful, most genuine, authentic conversation I had in a long time. And as I told him, over 200, this is episode 235. Monday was 234. This ranks as one of the top 5 easily most authentic, most genuine, most beautiful conversation, very organic. We're really basically open his heart to us. And that was beautiful. So he shared in that episode his background, his story, his relationship with family, and to allow us to set the picture, to understand who it truly is. And now we're going to dive deeper into the rest of getting to know him even further. So, Gary, brother, welcome back to the show.
Oh, good to be with you, Lorenzo. Bless you.
Pleasure's all mine. How are you feeling today? First and foremost, how are you doing?
Well, my emotional energy is good. I mentioned to you just before this call began that I had emergency tooth surgery yesterday. I woke up a couple of mornings ago with huge pain in what I thought was my teeth. And for 2 days, I couldn't sleep. And I went up going to the nearest dentist, which is about 2 hours away from where I'm off here in the boonies, and had 2 teeth extracted. They were both infected, and there was the jaw was getting infected. I was getting concerned because I nearly passed over or nearly died.
Wow.
7 years ago, when I had a little cut in my shin that went up to my lower back, and I had a huge staph infection, and I didn't really notice it. I'm such a powerful guy till I couldn't move, couldn't walk, and I was in such pain. And so I had an emergency laminectomy and spinal surgery, and a month of injections of antibiotics. And they told me I was free and clear of that. So I was a bit spooked because I haven't had an infection since. And since I nearly passed over, the last couple of days have been pretty horrific. And, I feel like I've come through a certain rite of passage with these 2 teeth that have been removed, with the nerves and all. And now I have sutures in my mouth, and my mouth is really raw. You can see it's swollen on the side. The whole jaw is still quite swollen. And happy to connect with fellow humans. This ride is not an easy one for all of us, and the rites of passage that we all go through, myself nonetheless, are huge to bring me into our deepest vulnerability and gentleness and core, tenderizing our soul through this sandpaper effect that we move through in this life. So that's how I am right now. I'm grateful to be here, and so pleased we can have this opportunity to reach others with our messages and messaging.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you're here, and I'm sending you all the healing and soothing vibes of the universe for a speedy recovery. So you're welcome. All right. So now let's pick up where we left off. So I want to start with asking you a question. There's a saying that says, change your story, change your life. And by story, I mean what we tell ourselves in our head all day long. So when you, Gary, you were at your lowest point in your life, how did you change your internal story to change your reality externally? Did you do it through the help of friends, family, books, videos, mentors? Tell us the process you used to change your internal story to change your external reality.
Well, it has happened at various times in my life, because like everyone and everything, my life is not like this or not like this. My life is like this, and sometimes like that. And so because of that, I've had many moments, multiple times during many days, where I find myself at a low. And often I'm finding that physical low
Mm,
is really coming out of an emotional or mental story,
mm,
self-talk, modus operandi that I keep
mm,
repeating that brings me down. And so for me, what works the best of almost anything is, as a good friend of mine once said, just add water. In other words, put me in a body of water to swim in, or a waterfall to swim in, or something like that. And I am soothed. I am back into clarity. I do gymnastics and acrobatics and meditations and sound breath healing meditation rituals in the water every day, except this coming week when I can't go into the water at all because of the sutures in my mouth, and I have to be sure that it clots okay so I don't have a rupture and another infection and I die. So physicalizing shifts my state. Also, for me, I can't just change the self-talk and go, oh, I'm going to say different words. It's not it. I have to physically change my state first, and then my emotions are more uplifting. I practice 3 key words almost all the time when I am in the waterfall meditating every day and at other times throughout the day. And those 3 key words are nurture, inspire, empower. So when I take time, whether I'm feeling great or I'm feeling low, to nurture myself, inspire myself, deep breath in, everyone, and empower myself with every thought, every word, every action, that simple practice, that joyful discipline practice, above any practice, puts me in the zone of feeling clear, radiant, receptive, magnetic, and able to attract to myself the things that I most desire in this
mm.
world, and to be that radiant being that I truly am in my core essence. So those physical, emotional, mental, spiritual practices, multi-sensorizing them all simultaneously, for me, is what works best for me.
Beautiful. Love that. Love that. You mentioned that your life wasn't like this, but more like this. Did you wish your life was more like linear, maybe even boring? Because from my experience, that the fact that it's like ups and downs, it makes it more exciting. Sure, it's not always fun and roses, but it's in those lows that you really appreciate the highs, and that gives you, you learn the greatest lessons, you make the greatest breakthroughs, you know, as far as wisdom and all that. So what are your thoughts on that? Would you have preferred to have a more linear life, more safer life than the ups and downs? What are your thoughts on that?
My first thought on that is a story about Napoleon.
Yes.
You know the story?
No, tell
No.
me.
Okay. Napoleon, before he became the world's greatest conqueror and one of the world's greatest military generals and leaders of the army, he consulted an oracle, a psychic, whatever you want to call it back then, clairvoyant. And the clairvoyant said, you have a choice in your life. You can either have a long, successful, and perhaps very boring life, or you can have a short life, so exciting, so adventurous, you never look back. He said, hey, I'll take the shorter life. I'm all about adventure and excitement and taking risks, and that's the life I choose. That's the life I've chosen. I love adventure. If I can practice each moment, whether I'm alone or with another being, or reading a book, or writing a play, or doing a song, or doing a painting, or doing a video, swimming in the water, I can have physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual adventure in the moment that fulfills my feeling of passionate purpose. It fulfills my purpose. I
Beautiful.
love adventure.
Absolutely. Alexander the Great is also thought to have had that choice as well. And he said, and there's a famous quote attributed to him. It says, I've lived more in 31 years than most people would in 31 lifetimes. And it's so true.
Who's that you're talking about?
Alexander the Great.
Oh, about him as well. So you
Yeah.
see, he made up for it.
Yeah. So, and I guess we would all, I mean, 99% of us would make that choice if given the opportunity, because hey, life is all about experiencing. Who wants a boring life? You know, at least I don't.
I was mentioning to you in our last episode, you were asking me a bit about my father and did my parents ever fully accept me because I was so far off the map. I became a court jester instead of a medical doctor, instead of doing something straight and narrow and fitting
Opposite,
into it. I
yes.
couldn't do it. And when my father told me, and I told you this the other day, but I'll put it here
Yes.
too, because it's in context. This is about a year before he passed away. I visited him in New York from my retreat resort center I created in Bali, and living in New Zealand, living in Melbourne, Australia at the time. He was in New York visiting with him, and he said, "You know, Gary, I have to tell you, your sister, she's done all the right things, and she's living the right life, the way we wanted her to, just the way we wanted you to grow up and be, to fit into all these structures and go to the schools and have the best life. And she's got her own real estate business, and she's happy in her own right. Yet you, you have done everything the opposite of what I've told you. You wouldn't listen to my advice, and you've been such an adventurer with your life. I have to say, I see that you're helping a lot of people with the choices you've made. I haven't agreed with the choices you've made. I couldn't accept that you're on a mission. How's that going to pay the bills? It started to pay the bills finally after I came to Australia. My transformational body therapy method, the Wohlman method for the whole person, became government endorsed by the Department of Education and Training in Queensland. And I was very much accepted. And my work has actually taken off here much more than when I was in my own country. A person, they often say, is never a prophet in their own land.
I was about to
So when
say
he,
that. Yes.
you're about to say those words. See, I'm being prophetic with you. And so my experience of being seen by my father in that moment, when he saw, you've been so much the adventure, we haven't agreed with what you've done, but we see that you're living a fulfilled life. We see that you're absolutely happy with your soul. He saw my soul. My father saw my soul. So happy about that. And he said, we see that you're doing something that makes you happy. You're helping so many people, and we're proud of you. And oh, that touched me so deeply.
Absolutely. I have a feeling again, and we talked about it last time, that perhaps your parents deep down growing up, they had dreams and aspiration of living a more enjoyable, daring, adventure life. But because even back then, the stranglehold of tradition, family, and societal expectation were too high. They were expected to go down one path. And for example, you said your father was a doctor, right? No, sorry, a
My
doctor.
father was a public accountant, one of the most successful.
Very successful accountant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your mother was a doctor, right?
My mom was a advertising
Oh,
executive
yes, yes,
who
yes. So
let
they
go of
went down a very, traditional path because they had to follow what tradition, family, society was expecting them to do. But deep down, probably they wanted to express, to live a more fulfilling and line with their heart, but they couldn't. And then seeing you doing what they wish they could have done, at first they were fighting it, resisting it because hey, they were still, too heavily invested into what society wanted them, and they wanted to continue that tradition. But then deep down, I have a feeling that they were cheering for you deep down at the soul level because hey, follow your heart, my son.
I agree. It surprised me towards the end of my mom's life when she turned to me one day, because she was always attempting to pull me fitting into the boxes that I never could fit into.
Yeah.
And she said to me the same thing, we're really proud of you. After my father passed away in 2005, between then and 2011, when my mom passed away, she said, I see that you're helping so many people, and what you're doing and the work you found, which is so different and not at all in the traditions that we were brought up with, that we felt was the right thing for you to do. We're proud. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of who you are and what you've become. And even though I needed to be as far away from them, particularly my mom, to be outside of their influence, to hear my own voices and follow my own intuition, I have to be grateful now at this stage of life, for they paved the way for me to feel safe to find my own way rather than having to follow tradition, which is what they thought they needed to do. Because they did that before me, I didn't have to do that. It was done. And so I could take it further. I feel like that was a real gift. And I haven't acknowledged them in their living life for that, because I was still full of resentment and bitterness and needed to rebel. But
Mhm.
now I see the gratitude that they paved the way. They paved the way for me to feel safe, to have the life of freedom that I have chosen.
I guess you chose this family because this family allowed you the right upbringing to really follow your dreams, follow your heart, despite them resisting at the surface level, but because they offered you the material comfort and the opportunities to study and get a solid foundation and education and all that, that should things not work out, you can always fall back to that. You had a very good safety net to allow you, but not just about that, but also about, because just like we select the parents, the family we are born in each lifetime. I have a feeling that they were the right people for you to really push you in a way. At first, they were resisting you to really get you to show your personality, to really, how bad do you want this? You know what I mean? It's not going to fall on your lap. We're not, that's why you were not born in a family of artists and creative people that would say, oh, by all means, do what you want.
Yeah.
Everybody, we all love a good challenge. Challenge makes us appreciate the journey even, and the end result even more. And the ultimate reward at the end is both your mother and your father telling you those words that I'm proud of you, son. You know, you're happy. At the end, that's what really matters.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that's very true what you say, that they were perfect for me in that way. When I
Mhm.
look back on it, I couldn't say this when they were still alive, because there was still so much rebellion and need for me to find my own voice, because they kept saying, you've got to go this way. This is what's going to give you security. No, it's not. I won't go that way. I'm going to go as far away from your influence as possible, hear my own voices, hear my own intuition, and be a model for others to step into their own unknown. That's what my life has become.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Now, speaking of the making the world better for others, tell us about your impact. Tell us about your business. Tell us about how you're making the world a better place and making others happy and finding their joy.
Okay. Well, it's taken different evolutionary stages.
Mm.
When I was in my early 20s, very physical, having just come out of a background of being champion springboard diver, gymnast, track star, with lots of awards from college and from high school. My physicalization at that stage drew me at that moment during that stage of life, when I moved to San Francisco in my early 20s, to the field of body therapy, because I was already deeply into the body. And because I had such a good English and training in communication and writing from my private high school, Horace Mann Private School in New York City, and a lot of experiences in my late teens and early 20s and studying with J.L. Marino in psychodrama, who is living in Beacon, New York, just an hour north of where I was living with my family near New York City, by Plains, New York. I had, with that and many other improvisational theater and psychodramatic experiences, opportunities to put together in that phase of life my love for the physical and my love for freeing emotional holding patterns, and out of that, the bursting when I was in my early 20s too, and I had received quite a bit of this deep body therapy. Out came all kinds of paintings and plays and song, all this creativity. Where did it come from? I thought I was a scientist and a scholar and an athlete. I didn't know I was creative. I was always painting, but my parents always said, you can't make a living with your creativity. So I had this wall up that I couldn't even recognize it until out was freed from me the physical tension, the emotional holding patterns, and then out came the creative energies and gifts of expression, once bound, then bound to release. And so at that stage, now looking back on it, talking to that younger self, now I see that I was starting to emerge as an archaeologist of the soul, meaning that I had a passion and a proclivity and a great ability to be able to free the physical layers of tension, the emotional holding patterns, and then out would come the creative gifts that would be laying one layer underneath, like an archaeologist digging under the landscape in the body. And so that was in my 20s. In my 30s, I moved to Hawaii. Mentioned this to you the other day. I came out as a court jester. I picked up this stick, this Sir Cedric Goodhead's androgynous court jester, mannequin, beautiful piece of porcelain. And when I moved to Hawaii, I met someone in the University of Hawaii, and I asked her to make a hat for me and a harlequin outfit for me, and I came out as a court jester. And during that phase of life, it was in my early to mid 30s, I was transforming lives by doing participatory storytelling, taking the legends and the folk tales of Hawaii around with the Artists in the Schools program in court jester costume. And from there developed a real love for doing improvisational theater and storytelling and recitations in public. That was like another phase of transforming lives. I remember I was at ground zero in celebrations in Hawaii with my girlfriend at the time. It was must have been 1990. No, 1980. Wow. When I first moved to Honolulu, and I was doing a presentation of one of my favorite poems, and there was a blind media activist in the crowd, and he must have felt and heard my words, and he turned to me and said, God, it was so moving. You just really touched my heart, and please, can you come into my radio broadcast? So another time I was performing at a breakfast, beautiful, fancy place, the Colony Surf, that's right, in Honolulu. And I was doing some storytelling, legend of Hawaii, some recitation. And months later, I met this woman who said, I saw you at that presentation and it changed my life. I said, what? I was just performing. She said, no, you weren't just performing. You know, your energy, your presence, your enthusiasm, your engagement, the way you connected with me, with all of us, it helped me see myself and my life in a whole unique, different way. Thank you for touching my heart with your infectious enthusiasm and engaging skills as a storytelling court jester. That was during that phase of life. And then I started to use these same gifts of improvisation and the desire to help people free from their inhibitions as I was presenting so much of the time in these other personas. Out came me as a presentation coach. When I first started to visit New Zealand and Australia, I had this passion, I had this feeling. I could talk to leaders of companies, people who were stuck in their own rigid ways of thinking and expressing. I could free anyone to be a compelling, telling, welling, swelling speaker. And
you know what? I'm starting to use that myself. I love that.
So much fun to play with words.
I know.
And so since I came to Australia and started visiting New Zealand and Australia in this part of the world in 1990, that's when a new way of helping people transform their lives emerged, where I would engage with one person at a time, like I do now one-on-one with my counseling here on online with Zoom, and many people can benefit from it online. But I was doing most of it back then, but we didn't have these abilities back then, live on stage with audiences, people coming up to the podium and sharing, this is my challenge. I have this on my YouTube channel now, my Mastering Presentation Skills YouTube channel now, where people make breakthroughs one after another. Or they feel frozen. Okay, how do you feel frozen? I feel like I'm being overwhelmed because I was once nearly drowned by a wave. I say, great. Let's have the rest of the audience come up and be the wave. And they're going to overwhelm you. Really? Yeah, let's do it as a piece of theater. Let's turn it into the theater. And so we have the person being engulfed by the wave. Say, now stop action. What would you say to the wave? And the person would say, well, in the past, I've let you engulf me, but now I'm going to ride with you. I'm going to take the flow and the energy and the momentum, and I'm going to bring out my wisdom even more. Something like that.
Wow.
Renegotiating their identity or view or relationship with the wave. And it would be life-changing for one person after another. And since then, I've pretty much been focused on that, combining the body therapy, the awakening creativity, and the presentation coaching in a multi-sensory, multi-discipline, multi-dimensional way of freeing people to be more fully, authentically themselves and to speak from their inner core. So that's the evolution of how I've been transforming lives in my 50 years since I was 20, of these different aspects that have grown and flowed and morphed from one form to the other.
Oh, wow. So right now, your business, who would you say is your ideal client avatar?
Avatar.
Yes. Who's your ideal client, ideal person,
Okay.
dream client?
Yeah. Well, my ideal client has been and will always be a person who is open to many layers of being able to free themselves from being held back in their physical expression, their voice, their message, their emotions, their creativity, their relationships, their contribution to humanity. My ideal client would be, and has been, someone who is either the CEO of a company, someone who is in a managing or leading role in a company, have many people reporting to them, someone who's running an organization, someone who's a leader in a community, who sees the value of combining professional development with personal development. Someone who can afford to bring me in and work with the whole group of people. I've done this with a number of chambers and councils, and work with all the different people who run the different departments, and then also with different department heads. This has been another way that I've been finding very, very effective, helpful. I remember I was working for a while after I was spending a lot of time in my center in Bali that I co-created. I was visiting Singapore, and I had an opportunity through some of the entrepreneurial groups, speaking groups that I was associated with, to offer to make a presentation to the Intercontinental Hotel in Singapore. And a man at the time there, who was the managing director of the company, I remember his name to this day, Gerhard Kropp, German man, hired me. And he hired me over and over again to work with all of his department heads to help free them in my physical, theatrical, emotion, fun, enchanting way to, one, remove their fear from speaking up, two, be able to be a better team player. So when I work with the people who are either the leaders of an organization or managing a particular department, or someone of that capacity who has other people reporting to them, I'm always asking, what is it individually that you would like to release, to let go of holding back, so you can fully share your voice, your wisdom, your message, and be heard? And as a group player, as a team player, what is it in you that would also need to release? And then again, I turn the whatever they say into Monty Python-like interactive, theatrical, ridiculous exaggerations, and then we play with the different parts. They're having so much fun, they don't even realize that their life is changing before their eyes. I remember one time, I think it might have been with that same group, that we were talking about in the hotel, what do you do with the situation where a guest is calling the desk to let the desk know that their light bulb isn't working in their hotel room? Do you call first, what department do you call first? Is it housekeeping? Is it, people who manage the electricity? Who is it? And so they didn't know, because most departments in most companies, they don't talk to each other. They're all in isolation. This is one of the problems, this illusion of separation that we have, that it continues in all of the things that exist in this plane. So I find ways for them to interact. At that point, by the the engineering department, the housekeeping department, and the different people that were all possibly able to help this one person who was the client that was part of this little scenario we created. And finally, it was the person who volunteered to be the stormy, upset client, the one who was losing the light bulb, was the managing director of the company, and he loved that, being able to be in a different role than running the show. It was great to have him be playing the role of the person who complained, because he doesn't get to do that very often. So by using this element of play with people who are leaders and directors and managers of organizations, companies, and associations, these are my best clients. When they're open also, not just to the presenting, but also to the emotional release and the physical, even working with them with body therapy, then I can really get in to the places where they've been holding back their heart, their speech, where they can release the burden they've been carrying on their shoulders, where they can open this band around the chest and heart and create more rapport to reach out and to receive emotional support with others. So I work with the body in communion with, in attunement with, in alignment with the presentation, coaching, and creativity. They all belong together. So it's leaders and developing leaders of organizations, companies, and communities. That would be my ideal client, open to all these facets of awakening.
Beautiful. And speaking of that awakening, speaking of the awakening, share with us an example of the most remarkable transformation you've seen so far from one of your clients.
Well, I don't know that it is the most remarkable, but as you said it, I got a little picture of one time when I worked with a man and what happened with him. Actually, now I got another one. Okay, I'm going to do the second one. I was invited to be the first international speaker for the first International National Speakers Association of Australia conference. It was in Melbourne. I was visiting at the time. It was in the early 90s. And the people who were in this group, it was on a retreat, were all very highfalutin speakers, very well paid, some of the best speakers in Australia. And they were basically speaking to their peers. They were in this group, and it was my turn to do my presentation for them. And I remember a particular man, he won't mind if I say this because he's passed over. He probably wouldn't mind it even if I spoke his name while he was alive. Something really remarkable happened with this man. Very tall, elegant, aristocratic looking man. His name was Jack Hone. And you look at him, you think he's an ambassador to a country or something. He had this beautiful, stately presence to him. Tall, dignified, tall posture. And I asked him, what is it that you would like to release to better connect with your peers, your audience, you're getting yourself out of your own way? What has been missing? Even though you're one of the top speakers in the world, what is it that's missing with you? And he said, at first he said, well, I feel uncomfortable looking like a fool because everybody believes in me and they look up to me, and I feel like they don't really see me because they keep putting me on a pedestal. And so I said, well, I just happen to have here my Jester's hat. So I pulled out my Jester's hat, and I said, would you wear this, please? And this, talk to us as though you're able to talk as though you're being really silly. And he couldn't do it for very long because it wasn't really that he was talking about. We removed the hat, and he was in tears at this point because it brought deep emotions. I said, what's going on, Jack? He said, up to now, I feel like I've been able to manipulate and convince audiences on how knowledgeable and powerful a person I am. But what people haven't seen in me, and he started to cry, is how much I care. You are my peers. You have been my peers for all these years. And I want to let you know what matters more to me than impressing you is to let you know how much I care for you. And in those moments, he was so beautiful and so authentic. People came rushing up to him, giving him a hug. One person after another said to him, I have never seen you being so authentic. Ever in all these years we've seen you presenting, you always had this mask, this veneer on. And he wrote me a letter a few months later, and I remember the letter. He said, I don't know what you did to me, but in the shortest time, whatever you did to me on stage, I am now so easily authentic and speaking to audiences. Something shifted by you allowing me to first practice what it would be like to be able to lose control and be foolish. That didn't work. And then to share my deep, true sensitivities and caring for people. That was so powerful. I've never been the same since. I am so grateful. In those few moments, it shifted my entire ability to communicate to audiences.
Wow.
That was of the most powerful. I've had many experiences like that with people, but that stands out. That's one of the ones that stands out for sure.
Beautiful. And how does it make you feel when you hear those kind of incredible transformation from
What
your
do you think?
practice as a
What do you
result of
think? I
you?
feel like I'm living my purpose. I'm true to my purpose. I'm on track. I'll give you another example.
Please.
This was with a man named Brian Head, an international speaker and hypnotist. I met him when I first visited this part of the world. I was in New Zealand, first visiting this part of the world, and it was in the early 90s. I was doing some different presentations, similar to what I'm doing now, just getting started on that back then, mastering your presentation skills, an earlier version of it. And I was just thumbing through the physical yellow pages which we had then one day. And I came across an ad about that large, pretty big ad, about an eighth of a page. Brian Head, international speaker, hypnotherapist, classes. And I thought, you know what? I felt it. I felt it in my body. I felt the yes. I could feel it viscerally. I'm going to connect with this guy. I don't know why, but I feel it. He's either going to be full of himself and like, I don't need you. I'm past all that. I'm a top speaker, blah, blah, blah. Or he'll be humble and open, as some of the best speakers are, to learning and growing and changing. So I called him up and he said, oh my God, are you calling about that yellow pages ad? I said, yes. He said, I spent $10,000 on that ad. No one has ever called me. Whatever you're doing, I want to know about it. This has really tickled my interest. Come over, give me a private session. So I did. I took a catamaran from Waiheke Island, where I was
Wow.
staying and living. You know Waiheke Island, off the coast of Auckland, and I came to Auckland, and I gave him a session. And before I gave him the session, I watched him present to a group of potential people to join one of his classes. There were about 100 people in the room because he's a very popular speaker and he was very, quite renowned. And he was shouting to the people in the audience like this. And it astounded me, that he would have to speak so loud. So the next day, I had an opportunity to give him a
Can you use the microphone?
I don't remember. I don't think he was. But he was shouting. That's the point. And the next day in the session, I simply offered the question to him, Brian, when you were presenting and offering your classes to this group of people in the audience last night, I noticed that you were shouting to them. What were you shouting for? And he looked at me and he got teary and he said, oh my God. My father never listened to me. So I've been shouting to audiences ever since because I never felt heard.
Wow.
In tears. And in that moment, his voice got tender, humble. And it changed his whole way of presenting. He began by realizing what he'd been doing all of his life because his father never heard of. I said, well, let's do a little exercise with you and your dad. Let's talk to your dad and tell your dad what happened. And dad, never heard me. And if your dad could really hear you, what would your dad say? He said, dad, son, just like what happened with me in my life, son, I never really heard you. I'm so sorry. I never really listened, but I have to say, I'm so proud of you and who you've become. Oh, I feel heard now. And from that little exercise, by role playing, doing a little psychodramatic playback theater, interactive engagement with someone who we called his father, I can do it just as easily as I often do with people now with the hands. On the one hand, this, on the other hand, that. What did this one say? Until it becomes a communion, a connection.
Yeah.
And he's happened, and he became tenderized, and he became vulnerable, and he became grateful and receptive and so easy to hear. That was a life-changing moment for him. That was one of the moments that stands out. I've had hundreds of them. Like that's what I go for. I go for the place where a person can have the swiftest, most sustainable, long-lasting transformation from letting go of an old self-talk, an old modus operandi, an old habit, an old pattern, an old familiar, to create a new familiar that then becomes the new familiar program that people then come back to instead of the old litany. So that's my whole strategy of working with people, no matter what I'm doing.
So when you say you help people remove some blockages, do you specialize in mental blockages, or do you also do, for example, money blocks, financial blocks, uh, and things like that?
My main focus is emotional blocks, mental
Mm.
blocks that have to do with relationships, with speaking, with people feeling like someone held them back. And I combine my prowess of the human body with the understanding I have about emotional and psychological nature to help people break free. Another example is this. As you're speaking, I'm getting little pictures and memories of incidents that happened from the past. After first getting started in doing these presentations in New Zealand and Australia in the early 90s, I remember coming back to the San Francisco area where I lived 3 times in my life, and I was doing a presentation for nurses. And there was a nurse that stood up in the crowd, and I said, what's been holding you back from really connecting with people authentically, sincerely, and with your depth of heart and fullness of expression, speaking from your inner core? And she said, well, not just as a nurse, but we as women, she said, have been held back for so long. We have been in this male-dominated culture where whether we're doing the same work, we're making this money, or when we're in some ways feeling like we desire to be heard, we feel like we're being held back. And I said, would you mind? Would you give me permission? You just said the words held back. Can I please hold your back like this and have you continue to talk? She said, okay. And I wasn't going to do anything physical or intimate, but I knew this was the thing to do, to take over her defense system. I would physically, emotionally, mentally take on it for her so she doesn't feel like she's doing it herself. And she kept saying, we've been held back for so long and I'm tired of it. And she broke free from my hands, just like that. And in that moment, she broke free and she was never the same again. So
Wow.
this is what I specialize in, releasing the physical, emotional, and mental patterns of holding people back that have been there forever. Another moment comes to mind. I was in New Zealand doing one of my presentations in the early 90s, and there was a woman in the audience. It was a fairly large audience who volunteered. And I said, what is it for you that you would like to free so you're able to be more comfortable, authentic, engaging, connecting with people who you are in front of, whether it's a professional audience, personal audience, friends, family, lover, whatever. And she said, I don't really want to go. I would rather hide behind that curtain. I said, okay, go ahead, hide behind that curtain. So she did. And I said, okay, could we please have our next person? Who'd like to go next? I was totally ignoring her, but I was doing it with full wisdom and clarity that she wouldn't like that at all, because I just basically cut her off from having a turn.
Especially in front of a crowd, you know?
she pulled the curtain aside and she said, "Wait a minute, how about my turn?" And she began to speak freely because she broke free from the inhibition that she bought into. About 15 years later, I was at a 5 rhythms dance class in Melbourne. I was dancing in this class and we had a break and we're doing some connecting with the people from some of the exercises we were learning on the dance floor in this conscious movement expression class. And a woman was talking to me about, I don't know how it came up, time that she was living in New Zealand, this woman who was in the class, and she remembered some guy, because I was calling myself Elijah, my Sufi name then, so she didn't know me as Gary. She said some guy came over from the States named Gary, and he did this exercise with me, and I said I didn't want to go on stage. I was hiding behind the curtain, and I couldn't stand it, and so I broke free from the curtain, and now I'm teaching women to speak for a living. I'm helping other women stand up and be the assertive, engaging people they meant to be, because that's what broke free for me with this man. I said, "Excuse me, but I'm that man. I'm that same person. I'm just using a different name." She, "Oh my God." So that's my specialty. That's what I do. I find the moments that people have been frozen, pushed back, or they've been telling themselves for ages that I can't do this, I can't connect, I can't engage, I can't step up. And I have them redo the moment and then add different elements. So then the new desired outcome becomes compelling. And that's what they come back to is the new default program. That's my specialty.
Beautiful. And do you do those usually in person or do you do it also online?
More online these days, because like I've been saying, I'm 2 hours from the nearest town, 2 hours south of Brisbane, and 2-3 hours from Byron Bay on the coast. So it's really easy to do this, to connect with people online. Oh my goodness, is it easy? I don't have to even leave my caravan and I'm connected to the whole world. So for those who want to connect with me online, it is a joy to be able to connect in this way. In a very few moments, I've been practicing this for so many years, we can really cut through some patterns that have been holding people back from their partnerships with their body, their relationships, their communication, their creativity, and their contribution to humanity. So I do that through interactive exercises that are engaging, that are physical, that are emotional, that are creative. And the Zoom helps a lot because people then get a copy and they can see what they've done. And because they don't believe that they shifted, they still can't go back to where they were before. It's impossible because they have a new framework. They can't go back. You shine light in a dark room, even with a candle, it's no longer dark.
I mean, yeah, me and you, that's a good thing. We're not too far. We only were like what, 20, 25 miles away from each other?
How many miles are we from here? I think it's about 10,000 miles.
No, 20, 25 miles, just very close. Uh, but
I think we're no time separate. We're there's no separation at all.
absolutely, no, absolutely. That's beautiful. Love what you're doing, brother. Keep doing what you're doing. Now, let me, the theme of this podcast is, building impactful, meaningful, purposeful, cause-driven businesses. What would you say for you, Gary? What is a cause that is dear to your heart?
The cause that's dear to my heart is what I've been saying all along. It's freeing people from the oppression that they, we, I, you have experienced by well-meaning and well-intentioned authority figures, parents, lovers, friends, brothers, sisters, teachers. And from those experiences where they felt like I can't speak up, I don't matter, I'm not worthy, it's the same pain and wounding that I went through. I've learned, and I spent my whole life, as I'm mentioning, as an archaeologist of the soul, helping to free people from the physical tensions, the emotional holding patterns, to then liberate the creativity that's bound in the landscape, now bound to release. So that is my superpower. And that's what I focus on with people, to assist in releasing the oppression, suppression, depression, holding back patterns, and to liberate and ignite a new self-talk and modus operandi that people return to over and over and over when they get stressed, rather than the old familiar litany. So we create a multi-sensory new engagement with the new self-talk. Therefore, that becomes more familiar and people don't go back to the old patterns anymore. That's what I would say to answer your question, that I feel I do the best.
Beautiful. Love that. Listen, Gary, me and you, we can talk for hours and hours. We can do an entire season, an entire podcast. I mean, there's so many things we can talk about.
We'll meet again. We'll continue these podcasts. It's great.
Absolutely. Plus, you've been around the world, so we can do multiple episodes just on traveling alone and on each location you've spent time with. But let's start to wrap this up for today. And to finish, I'd like to ask you a series of rapid fire questions on advices. Ready?
On vices?
Advice.
Advices. Yeah.
All right. So what would you say has been so far the best piece of advice you received up to so far?
From anyone ever?
Yes.
Penny Kingston name comes up when I was in camp. I was around probably 10 to 12 years old. And he said something. He was really good at different sports and things. And I was good too. But he gave me an expression that stuck in my mind. I haven't thought about it probably in 30, 40, 50 years. But in the moment you asked me, I remember he said this expression: the only way to do something is to do it. The only way to do something is to do it.
I'm going to write this down. That's beautiful. Sometimes, quite a lot of time actually, the greatest advice is the simplest one. We often overlook because it's too simple.
It was so simple. Didn't pay much attention at the time, but when you asked me the question, that's the first thing I saw on the movie screen of my blank tapestry movie screen of my mind.
So the only way to do something is to do it. Wow, beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, Nike has a similar expression: just do it. Right?
I think Nike might have been inspired from this. I can see that. Yeah. Now, what would you say has been the worst piece of advice you received so far? Other than get a job.
I think it came from my dad when he was frustrated that I wasn't at first successful financially as he was with the work that I said I was on a mission to do, which now it's really paying off for me. And he kept saying, why don't you just get a job in McDonald's or someplace where you can get a regular salary and where you can get good retirement benefits and an insurance plan and medical benefits. And like, that was so unappealing to me. I just had to go the opposite direction. Security. What kind of security do I need? The security of living my life to the full is what I chose. And that's served me way more than holding on to this belief that I had to follow in this rigid pathway of tradition that didn't speak to me at all. I didn't follow his advice.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, imagine that you're blessed with a time machine. You can go back in time and sit face to face with the 18-year-old Gary. What's the number one piece of advice you would give to him, knowing all that you know now?
Gary, you at age 18, I now speak to you as your elder, wiser self. At age 18, you were just graduating from high school and you were about to go into college. You were actually applying to all these different colleges. And at that time, if you remember carefully, you were very intent on getting into medical school. And there was someone that you knew through your family who said he'd write you a good recommendation to Johns Hopkins University because he could then help get you into Johns Hopkins Medical School. And you sacrificed your life at that time because you also had an opportunity at that same intersection to go to Tufts University, but didn't have the same kind of good pre-medical program. But you were able to join the Springboard diving team and go to Boston and probably have a whole lot more creative, fulfilling life than going to Johns Hopkins, which was a lot more conservative. You did, as it turned out, you became the social chairman of fraternity, and you wound up being a champion springboard diver there anyway. But the school was all male. There was no women there, just like in your high school. And if I were to give you any advice, I would say if you could do it again, I'd go to Tufts. I would go to where your heart was saying yes to you, and not what your parents and this doctor were saying they can get you into good medical school by going to this other university. So that's what I would say to you specifically about not just your life, but that decision you made at age 18. I can't say you made the wrong decision, because your life, you've made up for it, okay? You've made up for it and you've become me, all right? But at the time, you really sacrificed your personal fulfillment, and you had to wait till your early 20s till you could bolt out of Kansas and go, Oklahoma, or in your case, New York, and start making your westward migration, as you have done, to live the fulfilling life you have.
Beautiful. So if you had gone to that university, how would have your life been different so far? Do you think it would have been easier?
Had I gone to Tufts University, I would have felt more of a connection with women, because there were no women in my college until at the time I was graduating. So I didn't have the same intensity of connection. I had an intensity of connection because there was no ongoing casual connection with women. It was never that way until after I graduated from college. And the subjects I would have studied, I felt, would be much more humanistic. I may never have gotten to medical school, which I didn't anyway. So the subjects I may have studied, along with the springboard diving, which was my passion back then, may have been a little bit more humanistic, which is what I got into when I did get into medical schools, and after graduating from Johns Hopkins, when I moved to San Francisco. And that's when I got into all this stuff that I would have gotten into in Tufts. So I made up for it. I sacrificed myself from age 18 to 21. I had a good experience of being there. I was a real leader in my own right, champion diver, and captain, chairman of the social chairman of the fraternity. Yet I really felt like there was something missing. So in Tufts, I felt like I would have a more well-rounded existence, and I may not have felt the pressure to rebel, which I did do, which has formed me becoming the court jester and all these very unique multidimensional cells that I may not have had the same inclination had I simply followed my intuition at an earlier age. Maybe I would have got married and had children. I don't know. But I felt like part of my rebellion was fueled by the sense that I was pleasing my parents and fitting into tradition when I wasn't really pleasing myself. And I had to, like a cannonball in the cannon, boom, bolt out of there after I had that conversation with my fraternity brother's father, a psychiatrist, who turned to me and said, shortly after I didn't get into medical school the first time, I see someone who's interested in humanistic psychology, and you'd be a real leader in that field. This was after college. It wasn't before. So I had to go through all that first to wake up to my appreciation of the physicality of my being, of my love for theatrics and improvisation, for the core connecting myself through psychodrama and other emotional and physical and body-centered release therapies to a way of speaking from my inner core and authenticity. That whole journey that I've gone on, everything was, spiritually speaking, looking back on it, perfectly the way it was meant to be.
Exactly. You are where you're meant to be. There is no right or wrong choice in life. Either way, you learn and you grow. Now, do you have your own podcast yet?
Not yet. No, I wouldn't know how to do one yet. I'm interested in what it is. I don't know what's entailed. I'd be curious about it.
Okay. Now imagine that you have a podcast right now, very popular, and today you're interviewing the most special person in the world, and which is yourself. So what is the first question that comes to mind that you want to ask yourself? Don't think too much. The first thing that comes to mind.
What question would I ask myself as the
First question
first?
that you want to ask yourself. Yes.
I'm not thinking, I'm just waiting for the answer to come. I'll do it this way. You, myself, that I'm now interviewing as my first podcast interviewee, I have a first question for you. And my first question for you is, I'm going to make it up as I start the question. I don't have the question formed. I'm just going to start saying words and see what comes. My first question to you is, how have you become the person that you've become? Which is what I've been talking about this whole podcast to you today. I would answer that question by asking that question.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Awesome. The last question that I ask, and that's my favorite question to ask all my guests, and that is,
I know what it is. I know it because I read it in your book today. What's the
yes.
smallest thing that you've done?
The microphone.
What's the smallest thing you've done? I read this today in your book that I've been reading that I just got in the mail today, in the chapter that I was most drawn to on you. And I was somehow drawn to this very thing that you said. My favorite question that I always ask at the end of my podcast to people is, what's the smallest thing you've done that's made the biggest difference? Is that the question?
Yes, sir. And what is your answer?
I don't know. I just am happy to have seen the question. So I was thinking about it. I say, I know he's going to ask me this question, and I'm not prepared to answer it necessarily, but I'm going to massage it for a minute. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to ask myself the question, because I do best in engagement. So I'm going to ask myself the question as though I was being interviewed by myself. What is the smallest thing that you've done that has made the biggest difference?
And by small, I don't mean something small. I mean the one thing, for example.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like tiny.
No.
No.
For example, for me, it's been starting my podcast. It's definitely wasn't something small per se, but it was the one
Small
thing
at
that
all.
had the greatest
Yeah.
impact so far in my life.
Yeah. This other than getting born, the smallest thing that
Yes.
I've done that has made the biggest difference was that moment that I have referred to a few times. That moment when I remember for the very first time in my life, when my fraternity brother's father, psychiatrist, turned to me at the end of my graduating from Johns Hopkins University and not getting into medical schools and saying, "Son, I see in you someone who you're talking about fame and fortune and security and status and being a medical doctor. And I see
All right. Awesome. Yes, Gary, go ahead.
if I were to have a podcast and myself were the first interviewee, I would say, you, as my first interviewee, the smallest, this, I'm sorry, I take that part out of time. I spaced out on what we're talking about.
Go ahead. Yes, Gary. So what has been so far the one thing, the smallest thing you've done that has had the greatest positive impact in both your life and business?
In business.
In both your life and business. So whatever it can be, either from your life, from your business, from whatever.
Okay. I was going to start to answer it by saying earlier, I'm glad we're doing it a second time, that the biggest moment in my life that I can remember that propelled me in the direction that I'm in now was the moment when I was speaking with a psychiatrist, father of a fraternity brother of mine. I flew all the way up to Boston from not getting accepted in medical schools. And I was telling him why I want to be a doctor. And he said, I see in you someone who's talking about security, prestige, power, position, money. And I don't see that as who you are. I see you're this young man full of creativity, full of energy, full of humanity, with so much passion for what I think you could really do even better in is to find your own way with the newly forming field of humanistic psychology. And so when I left his office, before I decided to take 2 large suitcases and tell my mom and dad, I'm leaving home. And mom knew I was never coming back. I said, I'm just leaving for a short while. I knew I was going to check out those schools and find my own way instead of hearing their voices all the time telling me what's right. So the single moment that started this whole compelling swelling that has grown and grown over these years, in my trusting, leaping into the unknown from one side of the world to the other, which I've done over and over and over again. This pattern started when I left his office and I heard my body singing, shouting, yes, yes, yes. I was so viscerally attuned to the alignment of my intention, intonation, and future self and present self marrying as one, that I knew that when I followed that and trusted that visceral feeling, that physicality in my body, that when I went 3,000 miles away to San Francisco, the same thing happened when I moved to Hawaii, when I moved to New Zealand, when I traveled to Australia, when I moved to Bali, when I traveled to Thailand. And I've become a real model and mentor for stepping into the unknown, because I know when a person trusts, as I have, leaping into the unknown with that feeling of yes, not just because it's scary or because it's not known, but because the yes is taken over, that brings with it endless opportunities, miracles, and a shower of support that would never be possible had it all been planned out beforehand. So that one single moment of yes has led to a whole repercussion of endless patterns of helping others in business and in their personal lives and their creative lives step into their own unknown once they recognize their yes. And from that, they find the person of their dreams in themselves. They meet the person they're going to marry. They find their true career. They find their creative gifts. And that has become my greatest gift. That simple moment that's become momentous and bringing out this momentum in so many souls. That's been my passion in this life. Yes, to find the known through the unknown, the visible through the invisible. This is my path and my way.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Wow, that's amazing. Listen, Gary, me and you, we can talk for hours and hours and hours, and we've done just that. We've been talking for, in total, probably 4 or 5 hours. Amazing, both on and off. And that's just, you know what? That's just the start of our conversation, you know? So we're going to be doing a lot more of those. For now, let's wrap this up. Oh, before I do that, sorry. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
But there's a few ways that are the best ways. One of the ways, and you could put this in the chat, or you could do this printed ways too, which I appreciate, is to reach me on my calendar. And they just make an appointment with me, free to have a complimentary half-hour chat. I think I can put the link in. You already have the link, I think.
Yep.
Another way is to write me, and that would be Dr. Gary, DrGary at my presentation doctor.com. You can almost see the words with my little finger taps, right? So that you can email me that way. Those are probably the best ways to contact me. I'm also available on Facebook. I do a lot of posting of my life, my pictures of my life, and the chickens and the kangaroos and the waterfalls and all the wonderful things about living here off grid in this national park. And that's Gary Wohlman, the spelling of my name that you can see in front of you right now. And that's another way you can connect with me. All of these ways are good. Probably the best way to connect with me, I would recommend, is the Calendly invite, and then you can just boom, make a time with me and we can go from there. I would recommend that above all the others at this stage.
You mentioned you also have a YouTube channel. What's the name of your YouTube channel?
Well, the name I don't think translate exactly because I looked it up on YouTube. So there are other channels that are similar on YouTube. So I'm going to spell out and tell you, I'm going to look at it right here, the exact YouTube channel, and you can put this and post this as well.
Sure.
I'll put this in the chat. So this is my YouTube channel. I'll put it in the chat so you can see it.
And send me all your
And
links
then,
and I will put them in the show notes.
sure, I'll put that afterwards. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So
Don't
right
worry.
now, putting it in the chat might be, there it is. So what it says is my YouTube channel. You go to YouTube and then you put in the words
Mastering presentation
Mastering
skills. Okay, 4125. Okay, I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, mastering presentation skills is the name of the channel, but the name of the exact YouTube URL is mastering presentation skill 4125. And
Yes.
it's I appreciate people subscribing to the channel, giving thumbs up for some of the videos you respond to, comments, and that way we can also be in engagement along with my other, by the way, Facebook page, which is Mastering Presentation Skills. It's the same, no, that one's called My Presentation Doctor. And that way I can engage with you live. But the very best way is, do you have the Calendly link?
Don't worry about that. Send me all your links later on and I'll put them in the show notes.
Which links do you want?
Just
That's the Calendly link. That's the YouTube link.
okay, send them to me later. I will put them in the show notes. Okay, that's the easiest way. So, all right, Gary, listen, absolutely love talking to you. You're a true, absolute, authentic leader with a heart. I salute you. Keep shining your light. Keep blessing the world with your presence, your impact, with your work, with everything you're doing. And stay safe, stay blessed. God bless you, my brother. Talk to you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Before you hang up, let's spend a minute after we finish this actual call to speak for a minute.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you for this great gift you have of bringing people out. Your gifts as well.
Pleasure on my
Bless
brother. Take care.
you. All right.